I have to confess, when Ranger first sent me their distress paints, I thought, why do we need another acrylic paint? But then I became convinced after seeing what our team could design with them.
We have some new colors of distress paint, and what I like about them is that they match our distress ink pads. The colors are the same. We also have some metallic distress paints and a Crackle paint.
And metallic and Crackle are just fun to do. So if this sounds interesting, come play with us. So here are the things we've been talking about.
There are festive berries, mowed lawn, salty ocean, evergreen bough, picked raspberry. Here's the Crackle paint.
Now, wait a minute. That was all the distress paints, the new colors.
Right,
okay.
The new colors that match those distress ink pads that we were talking about. Then we have the distress Crackle paint, which is actually going to come in a larger bottle.
Right. They don't make this anymore. This was a sample that we got.
Right. Then we have brushed pewter, tarnished brass, and antiqued bronze. These are the metallic distress paints that we come up with some pretty interesting looks with those.
And as intriguing as jars are, let's see what you can do with them. And
I do want to point out that these all, just like the other distress paints, they have the sponge top applicators on all of them.
And I bet you're going to show us that.
That's how we're going to use them.
So you're going to scoop those over. So we're going to look at some techniques and do a variety of materials with them. And the first one we're going to do is this marbleizing technique. And we're going to use some of the distress paints to achieve this look, right?
Right.
After Gail gets all the others out of her way.
I have two of the new colors, and one of our older colors that we already carry. It's chipped sapphire, that's the older one, and then evergreen bough and picked raspberry. And this is a standard, sort of a standard technique that we use a lot in some of the other projects that you're going to see, but everything's just a little bit different. You start by shaking them up.
The same but different, is that what you're telling us?
The same but different. We all know how that works. So we're going to start by shaking them up a little, and on our craft sheet we're going to start putting some paint. And just dab some paint in different areas. Usually I use less of the darker color than I will some of the other colors because it can tend to overpower whatever you're working on.
Good tip to have.
So a little bit more of the pink. And I like to try to make it about the size of the piece of cardstock or whatever I'm using so that it will get all over the cardstock without having to move it around too much. And then I have this evergreen bough. It's kind of a teal look. It's a real pretty color.
I'm surprised it wasn't more of a green, true green, but it's more kind of tealy.
With the name. And now I've got a water spritzer. I'm going to move my cardstock out of the way, and I'm going to get that wet. And that was about 4, 5, 6, maybe a couple more spritzes. I want to get that pretty wet.
A couple, 4, 5, 6,
and
maybe more.
And then I'm going to swipe this piece of cardstock through a little bit like that. And I want it a little bit, when I look at it, if I can see a lot of definition, I know I want a little bit more water on there. And you know, you can keep using this. You can swipe other pieces of cardstock through too. That'll last you for.
Now you're not swirling it, you're just
really,
stroking
just
it through.
Swiping it. So there we go.
Big difference.
Get the corners as well.
I see why you did fewer drops of the purple, of the darkest color.
Right, because it can tend to overpower. Once it's done, if I want it a little bit more marbly, I can add a little bit of water right to the top of it. It'll help it to blend the colors through a little bit more, and a little spattering always helps. It gives it a little texture. Another thing you can do is after it dries a little bit, you can get a little water on your fingers and just flick some more dots of water on it. It makes lots of fun little looks on there.
So you're continuing to add. Right. So it's really more a coloring at this point. Right. Marbleizing is loosely used because you're doing multiple colors.
Right, but as it dries, the colors just continue to move into each other while it's wet, and then they settle when it dries. So a little bit of change will happen here still.
So the thing that you'll need to know with this process is every piece is going to be different. So
that's right.
You just that's a really fun thing, but sometimes if you're really trying to duplicate something else, that can be frustrating.
That can be. One real quick thing that I'm going to show you is if you can't wait, you want to dry it, there's just one other thing you can do. You can dry it all the way if you want, or dry it just a little bit like I'm going to do here. And then you can go through the process again. Say you wanted a little more of one color than you did another. So you can just keep adding layers of color onto there.
Okay. And again, it's going to get different splotchinesses, right? Okay, so we're going back to our card, which it looks like it had more of the pink going on. The purple is more on the edges. So that's going to be another way that you can direct the color as you're kind of doing this marbleizing. Now, in this case, we also did a piece of paper that was with the pair of swirls cutting die, and that's the swirl that you see here as well as up here.
Right, and there are some chipboard pieces. You can see this bird on here, and real quickly, we sell the little chipboard birds, real cute, and you can just use distress paint right on those.
Directly on them.
In fact, I kind of want to show you on that.
In fact, I bet that applicator, why don't you show the applicator? Because I think it's a nice little addition. Right.
It's this little sponge applicator, so you keep it wet and it'll, with the cap on, you don't want it to dry out. And it just puts the paint right pretty much where you want it. And you can just make circles. I mean, if you could go on paper and just make circles of paint and make a design just like that with circles of paint, or you can brush it as well and get it all over. One thing that I want to do on this bird, because it was done on the project, is after the paint is on, but before it dries, you want to put a little micro glitter on there.
You want some paper underneath it?
That's a good idea.
Okay.
So just before it dries, just sprinkle just a little bit, just the tiniest bit of micro glitter on there, just for a little bit of effect. And it'll stick on there as the paint dries, and then you've got a glitterized birdie.
Boy, quick and easy, isn't it? Okay, let's go back to the project. Looks like that was done also on the bird cage, and from Maya Road, their packaging has both the bird cages and the birds and the wings. We have placed this on the Festive Feathers papers, and we've added some of the dazzles that are also in the feather design. This is the gold pearl, so that's been added behind. And actually, this piece of the feathers paper almost looks marbleized too, to kind of go along with the piece of cardstock that was used.
Doesn't it?
So really nicely done. So that's kind of what we wanted to do, is to show you the process and then show a way it can be used, where it can be a part of an assemblage of products. So that's how that works. Now, another thing that you can do with the distress paints is to stamp with them, which is such a surprise.
Sure, but you can put that right on your stamp. So you've got the birthday cheer stamp set here.
This is the birthday cheer. It's perfect for the chalkboard look, which, as you know, is the white embossed on a black cardstock.
Right.
But how fun to see it in a color. Now, you can use an ink pad, certainly, or you can use the distress paints. What I thought was fun is look at this piece. It is a background paper that's been made by restamping multiple times on one piece.
But first, the paper was created with that marbling technique that we talked about.
I didn't know that.
I don't remember the exact colors. If you check on the gallery, it looks like mowed lawn, evergreen boughs, possibly. And so that was the marbling technique was done, and then it was stamped with festive berries.
Very good. Okay. And then more.
And then the pearl, the pearl allure swirls are in here.
And that's this set, which comes in rhinestones as well as pearls. But I think it's so fun to see that really elegant look onto something that's kind of fun and funky.
Right. There's lots of things going on. The chipboard, which has been, this distress paint has been stamped on there as well.
Works really, just very nicely. And as you know, you can cut apart those rhinestones or pearls. So we've got some swirl over here, and we've got more swirls right there just coming out of the stamped image. Now, there's another thing that you can do to get another look on a different material.
Right. This is from our 10-pack of white tags, which are glossy on one side and matte on the other. So when you have something that's glossy, you're going to do the marbling technique, but look, it's just going to do a completely different thing because the paints aren't going to soak in quite as much. This has also been embossed on with one of our new stamps.
And you're going to show us this, right?
I'm going to show you not the embossing, but the marbling.
Yeah, the marbling.
Technique.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So I have 2 of the metallic distress paints. I have brushed pewter and tarnished brass. And with most of these techniques, we're going to use a water spritzer as well because you want to get things wet. So here's the glossy side of the cardstock, and that's the side that I'm going to be using. But I start with my craft sheet, and just like the other paints, I shake them up.
You can hear that ball inside.
That's going to keep everything mixed, especially with the metallic paints. I find if you don't shake them up pretty good, then you're going to get a little bit of a watery paint when it starts coming out. You definitely want all of those different paints, the little molecule, or well, not molecules, granules or whatever pigment, you want it mixed around. Okay.
I'm sure there are molecules in there somewhere.
There's molecules in everything. It's all around us. Okay, so here's the pewter. Take that top off. And so we're just like in the other marbling technique. We're going to get a little bit of everything mixed around. We want it in different areas.
And this doesn't look like anything at this point. Let's just be, let's honor that. But soon it will. Don't forget to mist.
Don't forget to mist it, because if you don't, you're just going to get these spots of paper. You want it to blend a little, so adding a lot of water.
So it is water activated. And again, the shiny side.
The shiny side of the glossy cardstock, I'm going to, this tag anyway, I'm going to put it right down, sort of move it around and swipe it a little bit. And pick up.
Ooh,
and
wow.
There's enough of the water in it that it'll actually drip around. You can get some interesting effects if you let it move around.
How pretty. I was thinking that you used a yellow on it, but you used the gold.
The gold, the 2 metallics. You can use go ahead and dry that with a heat gun, or you can let it dry on its own.
It almost looks like the silver is going to rise a little bit. Or at least it did on this one.
Well, when they hit each other, they sort of separate and they go into each other and then they push away from each other. It's
now, would you dab it again, or would you go ahead and let it dry?
Well, I would dry it first.
Okay.
So if you'd like to see that, I would go ahead and heat dry it a little bit if I wanted to put it in that mixture again.
So that way you knew what you had before you went back.
But what's great about it is while it's drying, it's moving around and it's just creating all kinds of fun and funky lines all over. So
Really?
that's really neat.
It's more patterns, isn't it?
Right. Creates more. Now this is a really light look.
Yeah.
So after it's...
Let's have them next to each other, just at this step anyway. So this has become more silver, and this is more kind of globby, granular there.
And, if I had let it dry on its own, I think it would have looked a little more like that.
Do you think so?
Yeah,
okay.
But anyway, at this point, you can also just put it right back in there and get a different look.
Ooh, I like that. I like that.
Like that one?
Yeah, I do. I like that.
Okay, so more layers.
That is gorgeous.
More interesting look.
Yeah. So you have to kind of
play with it.
Yeah, you have to play with it. You have to set aside rigidity and kind of be open to playing with it. Now you came back on top and did some stamping, right? So this
some
feather.
Embossing, right? So stamped with Versamark, embossed with 2 or 3 different colors of embossing powder.
Okay, and again, the gallery will have all of that. And what I love that our stamps have are some words. So let your dreams take flight is just a lovely statement, and added some of the jewel dazzles.
So it's a simple way to make a really unique tag on that one.
And for yet another look at what we have here. Now, these squares have been done with one color and then the metallic?
Right, one color and the metallic. So this is picked raspberry and pewter. This is salty ocean and pewter. And then down at the bottom, I mixed all 3 to get a purpley look.
Interesting. Really, all 3.
So you're using the marbling technique, but you're also using it on patterned paper. This might look like cardstock, but it's actually from the chalkboard paper pack.
Oh, from the chalkboard. Oh,
Right.
okay. And I see some pewter on the edges of it
Right.
too. So, okay.
So we're going to start. I'm going to show you what I did for each of those looks. Get these.
Don't look at that yet.
Not yet. So I'm going to do all of this at once. So you might want to back out a little bit. I've got Salty Ocean. I'm going to put that up here. And, oh, I'm not squeezing. Don't let me do that. And then I've got Picked Raspberry. I'll put that here. And these are separate areas that I'm going to work with. I'm not combining them, but down at the bottom, I'm going to make another one with both colors. And you'll see what I do with all of these.
Yeah, I don't think I would have done that. I would have thought, okay, I need a purple. Let me go buy a purple one.
And then to each of those, I'm going to add the pewter. So I start up at the blue, I add the pewter. And here on the Picked Raspberry, and then down at the bottom with both colors together. So for each of those squares, there's going to be 2 pinks, so I just have one strip that I'll cut in half
Now, are you?
after I create it.
Oh, okay. Now, are you going to mist this with water before you
am.
go swirling?
I
say
am.
quickly to make sure you're doing it.
I'm going to mist them with water pretty good.
And one thing about the mister that we use, this comes from Judikins, and you don't want to use a plant mister and think that, oh, I'll do double duty. You really want to use this because it makes a very fine, fine spray.
So there we go, and pick up the blue, and I'm going to do it a couple of times because I want that color all over.
Right.
Do that a little bit, make sure it's spread everywhere.
I think
now there's my blue.
I think it's clever to do that in one big piece and then trim that down.
So you can just cut it afterwards.
Yeah.
So there's that one. Then I'll do one in pink with that silver in there.
And of course, because these are all acrylics, your fingers will return to its natural color at the end of this.
Right, this is all washable afterwards. That's all right. I don't mind getting messy. That's a pretty one.
Yeah.
And then down at the bottom, with all of the colors together, it sort of ties it together.
Not yet.
Not yet. With that one, I felt as soon as I looked at it, I knew it needed a little bit more water because it wasn't really mixing very well. So you can add more water, and you've got more paint there, so I could put these off to the side and make lots more of them.
That's quite a difference with adding that water. Wow.
It is. And afterwards, what I did is I let them dry a little bit, but I sort of spritzed them with a little more water so they would just kind of keep marbling and adding a little spatter to them.
Huh.
So that's how I created those, and then cut them in half, and I actually distressed the edges to get that look. But there's one other technique that I'm going to do right while we're here with everything, or 2 other techniques. I've got the stamping, and I want to show you first that I took the pewter and I stamped this by inking or putting the paint right onto the stamp. And I stamped it in silver like that. So it's really kind of a messy look and you can't see it very well. So then I took the matching Salty Ocean Distress ink, which matches one of the colors that I used here.
Probably the Salty Ocean one.
Yeah, that would be the one. And then I went ahead and inked the stamp again. And after, you have to make sure that the paint is dry before you ink this right on top of it.
And this is one of the magics of having clear acrylic stamps, is you can see what you're doing.
And it does not have to be perfect. You don't have to get exactly on top of it. It has kind of a really neat kind of a look. It's a little bit...
so it kind of almost is a shadow to it. Oh, pretty.
So that was really neat. And the last thing I did is I created one of these feathers with the Feathers and Flourish template.
Gail's very first design template, I might point out. We are so proud.
I like using it. It's fun.
And so you're folding your paper and you put it on this solid fold line.
Right.
There are multiple feather styles, so eagle, quail, pheasant, owl.
Right. So this started out as a folded piece of paper like that. Traced and cut out the shape, and then I cut all the feather cuts while it's folded. Then when I open it up, I use my fingers to bend, and I want to do this before I do the distress paint. You want to just sort of bend these and give them a nice curve all the way down. Then I used the silver and blue area, which I'm going to add a little bit more of the pewter in there. I'm probably going to get a little blue on there. I'm not going to worry about it. I can just wipe that off on a piece of paper and clean that off very easily. But I like a lot of the silver in this one.
Why wouldn't you just go ahead and stroke the silver on the bird? edges.
On the edges. I could have, but I really kind of wanted the muted look, the same as the paper.
Okay.
And so then I just pretty much, I did the whole thing.
Oh, you're doing the whole thing? Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Put the whole thing on there.
Just did the tips.
What I really liked is that it makes, here, I'm going to do it one more time, a little bit more than on there. I liked how it went down the center, and you can just sort of let it, I cut it a little, anyway, and you can use your finger down the center to sort of accent the center of that.
Stroke it down there.
Right. And now, let it dry like that.
When that's going to dry, I don't know why I was kind of shocked when you did that.
That way.
Then you're going to get this very, just kind of lightly touched. It's not even gilded. It's
like
just
a pearlized look.
Right. And speaking of pearlized, you have then added some of the pearls to it, which is really just so unique, just beautiful there.
And this is one of the flourishes from the template down here. Right. And those pearls, they just fit right on it, and they just curve right around.
Beautiful. And then add some more of the pearls on down. There's your stamped image. Now, this one, it looks like you stamped the ink pad first, then the silver. You did the other way.
The ink was right on top of it. It sort of wraps around the paint a little bit.
And then on the inside, you did one more time. You're in my thoughts. Beautifully done with more of those papers. And it looks like you sanded the edges of the papers after they were dry.
Each square was sanded pretty heavily distressed.
So you get all of that gorgeous, gorgeous look. Okay, you ready for a couple more of using these? All right. We have a scrapbook page, of course we do. And this one, look at what's going on. We've got not as much marbleizing, perhaps, as it is blending those colors. You can see the swoops that are taken off.
Right.
But we've got circles on top and butterflies on top of that and flowers on top of that.
So Lene started off with just a large piece of cardstock, a 12 by 12, for her page on this.
And this is white?
White, right.
Okay.
And she used the paints. I'm not going to do this part of it, but she used the paints as is, just to swipe on there. And we've got broken china, seedless preserves. It's one of our older ones, and chipped sapphire. So a newer one with a couple of the older standbys. And
kind of just hold those for a second, because it lets you just see that color array as you're picking out colors. So she went more into the jewel tones with these two, but a lighter color here with the broken china.
Right. And then just use the sponge applicator, going back and forth and changing colors, put another stripe of this, a stripe of that. And then she let it dry before she put on this stencil. And you can look up, let's see what's the name of it. This is Bubble Curtain Stencil. And it's been used,
you can tell. Used. Yours would be perfect and clean and new.
Right. She just set this right on top, like so. And you can kind of go off the edges. I'm not going to do it because I don't have a craft sheet available at the moment. And then with the broken china, because it's a little bit lighter, you can just sponge right through the stencil. Just like that.
You could put it down with stencil tape if you want to.
I did this wrong. I'm wrong. I was thinking of this applicator. That's not what she did. She said it's actually important to use a dry brush. Because if you use the sponge through here, it could seep under the edges of the stencil.
Okay.
Okay, that's important.
So I remember you're going to bring the craft sheet back in.
Right over here, just the edge of it. So I'm going to go ahead and and I think that she probably opened it up and poured a little bit out here, but I'm just going to get a little bit. She poured like a dime size. That gnat's starting to sound familiar now from what she told me. And then you just pick it up with a dry brush. This is a dry stipple brush. And keeping your brush dry, you're going to go through it like that. See, that's going to use less paint.
Right.
And it's going to be easier to just stay within the stencil and not go underneath the edges and get a look that you don't want. And if I lift it up from this point, then you start to see it developing.
Now, do you think you could use a cosmetic wedge?
Let's see.
You want to try?
I've got one right here.
This is not approved by Lene. We just want to point out, but let's see.
Let's move to another part.
Okay.
And I think I needed to go just a little bit more.
Yeah.
Get that on there.
Just to see.
We'll see what happens. Okay, I'm using it so below the part I did with the brush.
Right.
Okay. What it works, it's a lot more muted.
It's much more muted.
But it does work. But you can put, more than one layer of it on there.
Right. Okay. Just giving options.
Okay.
So going back to the page, and I think this is really nice, both for the mixed media as well as the distressed paints, is you can do this layering. And that's what I'm seeing repeated through all of the projects is multiple colors, maybe done a couple of times, like as you put on the craft sheet and swipe it through and
layers,
swipe
and
it
then
through
there's
again.
this layer of stamping. So this was with either stays-on or surfaces. That's on the gallery, and those were stamped right on there.
Right. This is the new butterfly stamp, and
no problem to stamp on top of the paint, and then the paper flowers as well.
Well, I want to finish up with the butterflies.
Okay.
So letting the butterfly once directly on the paper, and then a second time on another paper.
Right. On the pattern paper.
Right. And so that is just really pretty. So that's cut out, foam taped on. You can see right there. And you can see up in the corner. So not a heavy concentration of the stamped image, but just lightly going around the photograph.
Right.
And then the paper flowers, they come like this in a tube. From Prima.
I think if you look them up, they're entitled Wildflowers, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. There's quite a number in there, and you can see how some were just touched with the distress paints.
Right. So they're actually painted on there, and that's a simple process.
Very neat. Now, we did talk about the Crackle when we started, but I've not seen anything happen with that yet.
Okay.
So here is our card. We'll get in close because we've got a couple of things going on. We've got the marbleizing being done with the, this is either the brass or the gold.
I think that one is the bronze.
The bronze, okay.
That looks right. So the bronze and probably evergreen bough is behind it. And I think that was just sponged right on using the sponge applicator.
Just
right onto
beautiful.
the cardstock.
Love those colors. Remember that color combination.
It's a good idea if you want the bronze or the metallic to really stand out, to let the layers of the different colors behind dry a little bit before you put the metallic on.
Okay.
Or it's just going to blend into it. It might get a little muddy.
Okay. Now that feather is out of this sheet. This is from our friends at Want to Scrap. This is a chipboard, so it is a sturdier surface.
Right. So it's like this. It's pretty thick, and it's pretty substantial. And what we did is we started by using picked seedless preserves. Seedless preserves, sponged all over that, and then you let it dry. And then you move on to your Crackle paint. Now, what Amy said is if you want a really nice technique, if you want a lot of crackling, you want to make a very thick layer, and then you want to let it dry overnight.
Okay.
So that's the best idea.
Oh, and it has an applicator.
It has an applicator
nice.
all in there with this brush on the end of it. And you can start brushing it on, but I felt that it's more of a dabbing technique because it won't be thick enough if you're just brushing. So I'm really kind of layering it on there and trying to make it as thick as possible right in the center. Well, I don't know, I probably want to make sure it's about 1/16 of an inch thick. So you don't want at least that. So you just don't want this light layer, or you're not going to get that real heavy cracking that you see.
So it's going to crack as it dries.
It cracks as it dries. It takes quite a while before you see that cracking. So when you're looking at it, you're going, hey, that doesn't look like Crackle paint. It just looked like this goop sitting there. Well, after time goes by, it does start to crackle and ends up looking like that.
Like this. So the goop will turn into this fun crackle. And it looks to me that I'm seeing another color on top. So I think a little bit of dabbing to that.
You know, you can go on top of the Crackle paint too and paint with the distress paints right on top of it.
Looks nice. And then there's another one right there. So it's quite a really pretty look, I think, to mix your metallics with your Crackle. And all of this, this has all been done on the Fancy Feathers papers, and both on the inside
and
also.
With those, with that new stamp set, the birthday greetings.
It is birthday cheer.
Birthday cheer.
And this is a bigger piece of that same green mixed with the copper. Just beautiful. Of course, the green looks like a patina, what copper will do when real copper naturally ages. Now we have one more, and I'm sure that we only have one more today. I think we're going to have more as time goes by. This is a very interesting, look at all of the marbleizing that's going on here, but this is not on paper. Am I right?
It's not on paper. It's on acetate.
Oh.
And so the different techniques have been used on the marbling technique has been used on the acetate. And then there was a little bit of spattering of some of the picket fence, but you can see it sitting on top of suede, so you can really see that look.
Right. Well, let me show you the suede. It's obviously the forest suede. Now, if that's looking black on your computer, it's really green. Green just sometimes does that. Now, to get the acetate, did you use one of these?
Yes,
where you get
an 8x8.
Right. Okay. An 8x8, because you get the words which are fun to use some places.
Maybe in scrapbooking or something like that.
Or card, but then you get this big area of clear. So what did you do on that?
Okay, well, I have a smaller piece of acetate here, but the general marbling technique we talked about is what you're about to see. It's just that it's different when you're using acetate. So I'm starting with mowed lawn, putting some of that down.
Now, it's always the same process.
Right.
That you're doing the dabbing on the craft sheet and doing the spritzing. So it's the color combination and the material, the surface that you're doing it on. Okay.
And I have evergreen bough here. A little bit of the brushed pewter is worked in there too.
I love the metallics.
Oh, yeah,
I love the look it gives.
We're going to use picket fence in a minute, but not for this part. So I'll get my spritzer, add a little bit of water. I'm running out of water.
Yes, I see that.
And then here we go. There's the acetate, and I'm just going to, this is neat because you get to see what happens when you put it down. It really looks neat when you set it down. And
now I want to swirl that.
Well,
should I resist that temptation?
If you do, you're going to have kind of one big color. You want to make sure that some of your colors are staying in the areas that you put them in. So that's how it starts out. It looks a little different if you bring the card in, because for one thing, it's sitting on the suede and it makes the colors look a little darker.
Much more intense, doesn't it?
But you can also go back, you can let it dry. But the neat thing is, one of the reasons it looks so different is because when it dries on acetate, everything just sort of parts.
Oh, that's why we're getting these globules.
Right. You get these big open areas because it's going to dry and then they're going to part. In fact, I think
almost looks like precious stones.
I can hit this with the heat gun and you might be able to see that just a little bit.
Because we have zero patience.
Of course. Well, I kind of want to prove what I'm saying here. Okay. So as it dries, you see it sort of parting in different areas. I do see that. And I could have added a little bit more water and make that a little bit more drastic, or you can swipe it again. There, I just put it in there again, add a little more color.
It feels like this is something that you certainly get more comfortable with as you do it. You want to slip it on top of this? I just felt like it might give that intensity of the color. Yeah.
It's a little different.
You can just
and
see.
Of course, every color is going to be different because you're adding more of one color than another. It always is going to change. Okay. And the last thing I did with this one is I opened up the picket fence bottle. And I had a little skewer or a small paintbrush, and then you're just going to flick some of the paint on there. Like this. Get a little bit and just sort of let the drops go on there. Big drops, little drops, however that works. Oh, and of course I did it before it was dry. So when you do that, here, I'll just reactivate it, because that's what it does. There.
Ah, then it's going to spread.
Wow. Watch, if you get close, I'm going to do this again. Oops.
You need
get
more.
Some more paint. Put it on there, and come on, get a spot right there. And then when you spray it, it makes it reactivate. And if you get a good look, then you go, oh, I want it to dry just like that. Then leave it alone.
Bring in the heat gun.
Right.
Okay, now that's what you did to create this very interesting background.
It reminds me of a famous painting.
It does, doesn't it? Kind of Monet-ish.
Yes.
And then you use the Four Seasons tree, and you cut that out. But I'm really seeing some texture on this one.
Well, that's got the Crackle paint on it.
Oh, it does.
And what I did was I brushed first I used that cutting die, so it got that beautiful tree, and it's just on brown cardstock. And then I put just on the edges where you can see here, I put just a little bit of the Crackle paint on the edges. Oh. You let it dry a little bit. It can be, dry to the touch. And then if you take the heat gun to it, it does kind of interesting things. I'm definitely going to have to do this on the craft sheet because when you're heating the Crackle paint, don't do it if the Crackle paint is really thick and really wet because it'll really get bubbly and it kind of starts going everywhere. You don't want that to happen. You want it to be mostly dry. It can be thick, but it has to be mostly dry. And then if you really concentrate the heat on some of those areas, see if I can make it happen here, then you can sort of change the look of it a little bit. I'll try to make it so you can see it. There, you see it changing?
So is it bubbling?
It changes the color, it bubbles it up a little bit. You can see it's sort of turning white.
Oh, it is.
It makes it crackle a little bit. You really have to concentrate the heat. But that's what I did out around the edges of the tree.
Okay. Oh, I see. There you go.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
It a little bit. So
yes, it does.
That was how I created that look.
It kind of frosts it. And that's really fun. Wow. And worked really well on that tree. So now we have an icy tree. And then I love how you did the petals down here out of the green suede, and you did some inking. And
this is with the distress ink, the Mowed Lawn distress ink to match some of the colors. The cutting die that you see, it actually comes with a 3-lobed leaf, and I cut those apart so they would be separated.
Okay, and did some little bit of stamping over there. And on the inside, oh, sweet. Oh, how beautiful that is.
Just a little strip of that acetate, yeah.
Don't throw anything away. And this Take Care is just beautiful right there. Okay, so the world of distress paints has lots of options, lots of techniques.
Lots of painting opportunities.
Yes, lots of fun.